Hey guys, tonight we step into something a little different. Imagine waking up on scratchy straw, shadows tugging at the corners of a room that is most definitely not your own. A day like this is not just inconvenient, it's a full-blown time slip. You're in medieval Europe, which sounds romantic until you realize that, statistically speaking, you probably won't survive this week without at least 3 mysterious fevers and 1 questionable stew. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I'm always curious to see where and when you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink at the low rafters above, beams blackened with centuries of smoke. The scent is a mix of damp earth, stale rushes underfoot, and the faint sweetness of hay clinging to your clothes. A thin shaft of morning light pushes its way through a gap in the shutter, illuminating a suspended dust mote that seems to float forever. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows, though not in the picturesque way storybooks promise. More like an irritated neighbor who hasn't had enough sleep. You stretch, and the straw beneath rustles against your skin, itchy, stubborn, and deeply unimpressed by your modern expectations of bedding. Your stomach growls. In medieval villages, breakfast isn't the lavish spread of bacon and eggs we imagine, but more likely yesterday's bread, maybe dipped in ale, if you're lucky. Historians still argue whether ale counted as hydration or just a cheerful excuse to start the day tipsy. But here you are, mouth dry, wondering if the rough wooden cup by your side holds safe water or something that will make your modern immune system cry, "Uncle." The air in the room feels heavy, tinged with smoke from a small hearth against the wall. It's no grand fireplace, just a blackened circle of stones, with a pot swinging on an iron hook. People in this time often lived, cooked, and even kept animals in the same space. One quirky tidbit: pigs sometimes shared the floor with their human families, partly for warmth, partly for security. Nothing like waking up to a snuffling snout at your feet to remind you that central heating won't be invented for centuries. You shuffle toward the small window slit. Outside, you glimpse a muddy lane, scattered with chickens, a child darting past barefoot, and a woman balancing a bucket with an ease that makes your arms ache in sympathy. You're no longer just an observer. You're in this, expected to play your part. The low hum of voices grows louder as villagers stir awake, already busy with chores, before the sun fully clears the horizon. And you, standing barefoot in that cool, shadowed room, feel the weight of a question pressing against your ribs. Do you step out and join them, or stay inside hoping no one notices the odd newcomer who arrived with nothing but the clothes on your back? Either way, the day has already begun. The sounds reach you before the full light does. Creaking wheels on uneven ground, the steady splash of water poured into buckets, the throaty calls of men urging animals toward the fields. Morning in the village is not a gentle affair. It is practical, noisy, and without pause. You step cautiously across the packed dirt floor, ducking your head beneath the low lintel as you push through the heavy wooden door into the lane. The cool air greets you, sharp and damp, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, hay, and something faintly sour that you decide not to identify too closely. Welcome to your first true morning in medieval times. Children dart between legs, some barefoot, others in patched woolen tunics that hang a little too loose or far too short. Their laughter rings out, quick and shrill, as they chase each other with sticks or tug at a reluctant goose. That goose, by the way, is louder than any alarm clock you've ever known. Villagers are already at work, stooped women shaking out bedding, men carrying bundles of kindling, an older figure pulling at the bell rope that will soon call the community to prayer. You blink against the new rhythm. The village moves as if bound by an invisible clock, one built on labor, ritual, and necessity. Your ears adjust to the soundscape, a layered music of daily life. The blacksmith's hammer begins its steady beat somewhere down the lane, each strike ringing out like punctuation against the chatter. Roosters add their off-key contributions, while cattle low from their pens. You overhear snippets of gossip, quick words about someone's runaway pig, speculation about the weather, a hushed remark about a tax collector's visit. That last one makes your shoulders tighten. Nothing ruins a day in medieval Europe faster than a knock from the steward demanding dues. A mainstream historical fact slips naturally into place here. Church bells were not just religious instruments, but also public timekeepers. Most villagers didn't own clocks, and certainly not watches, so the ringing bell organized their days. One bell for morning prayer, another for midday work, and yet another at night. Without it, the village's fragile rhythm would collapse. And today, the bell rings slowly, measured, reminding everyone that it is time to rise, to work, and, most importantly, to remember their place. You lean against the rough wall of a cottage, watching a woman sweep the lane with a bundle of twigs. She notices you and raises an eyebrow. Strangers aren't common here. You smile faintly, attempting to blend in, though your posture probably screams outsider. She shrugs, decides you're not worth the effort, and goes back to sweeping dust that will simply return with the next gust of wind. There's a quiet resilience to her movements, the kind of muscle memory born from doing the same task hundreds of mornings in a row. Now, because every era needs a touch of the ridiculous, here's your quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed roosters crowed not because of sunlight, but because they sensed evil spirits retreating at dawn. A rooster's crow was, in a way, cosmic pest control. Imagine your neighborhood HOA meetings today if someone suggested hiring poultry as ghostbusters. As the morning unfolds, you're pulled deeper into the sensory weight of it. Mud sucks at your feet with every step. The air is heavy with the mingled aromas of porridge cooking, dung drying, and wool being spun. A dog noses your ankle, tail wagging, though its ribs show more than you'd like. Animals here are not pampered pets. They're workers, guards, and sometimes, sadly, tomorrow's meal. A child whistles sharply, and the dog trots back. Duty done. There's a hum of urgency in the air, because morning is not leisure time. Villagers must collect water from the communal well before the line grows too long. Already, women with wooden yokes balanced across their shoulders shuffle past, buckets clanking softly. You instinctively glance at your own hands, uncalloused, unsuited for such strain. And you wonder how long you could actually survive here without betraying your modern fragility. The reality check is humbling. You pause by the edge of the lane where smoke curls from a cottage roof. The smoke smells acrid, not like the cozy fireplace crackle you might romanticize, but sharp, stinging. That's because many households burn peat or even dried animal dung when wood is scarce. Historians still argue whether the reliance on these fuels contributed more to air pollution or simply reflected practical survival. Either way, your lungs are already filing complaints. An older man passes by, carrying a sack over one shoulder. He mutters something in a dialect you barely understand, but the gist seems clear. You're in the way. You shuffle aside. trying not to trip over the uneven stones that serve as a makeshift pathway. His pace is steady, his back bent from years of hauling burdens heavier than yours. It dawns on you that most villagers live short, difficult lives. 40 might already feel like old age. Suddenly, your modern anxieties about gym memberships and standing desks feel laughably small. The bell tolls again, deeper this time, and the lane begins to shift. People angle toward the small church at the village's center, their steps aligning as if magnetized. You follow, partly curious, partly because standing idle seems more suspicious than blending in. The church is no grand cathedral. It's a simple stone structure with a thatched roof, small windows letting in only the faintest glow. Yet it commands respect. Everyone pauses at the door, tracing the sign of the cross before entering. Even children hush, tugged into solemnity by the weight of tradition. Inside, the air is cooler, the stone walls holding on to the chill of the night. Candles flicker against niches, their wax dripping into small pools. The priest's voice rises in Latin, familiar to him, perhaps foreign to half his listeners, but that hardly matters. The ritual, the cadence, the certainty of it carries the people more than the words themselves. You kneel awkwardly, straw still itching your clothes, and realize you've joined a rhythm older than any one villager's life. A sudden cough from someone near the back echoes in the silence, a reminder that illness lurks constantly. You glance sideways and see a woman clutching her chest, her child patting her arm. No one gasps, no one panics. Sickness is an old, constant companion here. Life continues, because it must. As prayer ends, the villagers file out, nodding to one another, settling disputes with simple gestures, or muttering grievances that may later find their way into the Lord's court. The lane fills again, louder now, as though the collective act of devotion unlocked a surge of energy. Children resume their games, buckets swing, and the hammer down the lane picks up its beat once more. You stand amid it all, caught between the strangeness of the past and the intimacy of shared human routine. Every clatter, every shout, every shuffle of feet against packed earth reminds you that while centuries separate you from these villagers, the need for connection, ritual, and rhythm is timeless. And just as the bustle reaches its peak, you catch yourself smiling. This somehow feels familiar. The sound of mourning in a medieval village, noisy and imperfect, yet strangely comforting. Like background music you never knew you missed, the market pulls you like a tide. After the clamor of bells and the ordered solemnity of the church, the village seems to pivot naturally toward its weekly burst of commerce. You follow the stream of people shuffling down the muddy track, baskets on hips, carts creaking under the weight of grain, wool, and a few hopeful chickens that appear more interested in escaping than in being sold. The road widens as it nears the open square, where wooden stalls have been hastily erected, and sheets of canvas flutter overhead like tired sails. This is not the grand bazaar of an exotic port, but for a community of a few hundred souls, it is everything: food, clothing, tools, gossip, and the fragile promise of change. The first impression is smell. Your nose is greeted by a jumble of scents: smoked fish, freshly turned soil, still clinging to vegetables, wool damp from yesterday's rain, and the sharp tang of tanned leather. Threaded through it all is the unmistakable sweetness of honey cakes, their scent floating above the heavier odors like a sly invitation. You're almost certain that if medieval marketing strategies were ever written down, they would read, "Bake something sugary, place it by the entrance, let the nose do the work." People jostle close, voices rising in a tangle of dialects. Sellers cry out their goods, exaggerating quality with a flair that would make modern advertisers blush. A man holds up a clay jug, swearing it will never crack, though the chip on its rim suggests otherwise. A woman waves a bundle of onions under your nose, declaring them fit for a king's stew, though you suspect most kings wouldn't get near this stall. Still, the trade is brisk, because survival here is about practicality rather than perfection. A mainstream historical fact fits neatly here. Medieval markets were not only centers of trade, but also legally protected spaces. Market charters, granted by kings or lords, ensured that commerce could take place without interference, and anyone caught disturbing the peace risked fines, or worse. These charters gave villages leverage, elevating them beyond simple clusters of houses and binding them into larger economic networks. For the people here, market day is as much about legitimacy as it is about shopping. You edge closer to a stall where bolts of dyed cloth are draped, colors ranging from dull browns to startling reds. The red draws your attention. It was notoriously expensive, often achieved through crushing thousands of tiny insects to extract a vivid dye. The merchant strokes the fabric proudly, clearly aware that most buyers will settle for cheaper shades. But he enjoys the chance to display wealth, even if it is borrowed from another world. You touch the coarse weave of the brown cloth, surprised at how rough it feels compared to modern cotton. Clothing in this time is meant to last, not to comfort. A donkey brays loudly nearby, startling a group of children, who immediately retaliate by tossing straw at its ears. The donkey ignores them, chewing sullenly on a bundle of wilted greens. One boy clambers onto a barrel and begins shouting an impromptu tale about a fox who outwitted a priest, his gestures exaggerated, his delivery winning chuckles. Markets were entertainment hubs, as well as commercial ones. Without theater halls or YouTube playlists, villagers relied on these bursts of performance to season their routine. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval markets employed ale tasters, officials tasked with checking the quality of beer before it could be sold. Imagine being paid to taste test pints in the name of civic duty. It was serious business, though. Bad ale could cause illness, and no village wanted its only source of hydration and happiness ruined by a lazy brewer. You scan the stalls, half expecting to see someone with a solemn expression raising a mug to the light, pretending to be an expert. You wander further, passing stalls with iron tools, clay pots and baskets woven so tightly that not a grain could escape. At one table, a woman displays herbs carefully bundled with twine. She murmurs softly to potential customers, promising remedies for fevers, charms for luck, and teas that encourage fertility. Some of her herbs are ordinary: sage, thyme, chamomile. Others look suspiciously like weeds. Still, her stall gathers quiet respect, for medicine here is equal parts knowledge, tradition, and hope. Historians still argue whether these herbalists were viewed more as healers or as suspicious figures straddling the line of superstition. You're reminded that the line between science and magic was never as sharp as we like to believe. The crowd thickens as the day stretches. Voices overlap until they become a steady hum, punctuated by the squawk of geese, the clang of coins, the occasional heated argument over prices. A man accuses another of watering down milk, the exchange drawing spectators faster than any entertainment. The steward eventually intervenes, his stern presence enough to dissolve the quarrel. Law and order cling to market day as tightly as mud clings to your boots. You pause at a baker's stall, the warm loaves stacked high, their crusts blackened from wood-fired ovens. The baker smiles, sweat gleaming on his forehead, as he hands over bread to eager customers. Bread is the staple here. Dense, filling, sometimes gritty with ground husks. You bite into a small piece offered in exchange for a coin and nearly crack a tooth on a stray pebble. Millstones, after all, aren't perfect. Still, hunger doesn't argue, and the taste is hearty enough to remind you that this simple food kept generations alive. Somewhere at the square's edge, a minstrel begins plucking a lute. The melody is uneven, but villagers gather, clapping in rhythm, grateful for music no matter how imperfect. A girl twirls clumsily, her braids flying, while her mother watches with indulgent pride. Laughter ripples outward, cutting through the seriousness of trade. For a moment, the market feels less like survival and more like celebration. You take a deep breath, the air thick with smells and sounds, and let yourself be carried by the crowd. Every turn reveals something new. Salted fish glistening in barrels, a potter shaping clay with hands caked in mud, a merchant unrolling maps that may or may not reflect real geography. You realize this is not just an economic event, but a living mural of medieval life, messy and vibrant. As the sun tilts higher, shadows shrink, and the square grows hotter. Sweat beads at your temples, your throat dry from the dust kicked up by countless feet. You glance back the way you came, but the crowd presses forward, as though urging you deeper still. There is no escape from the flow. You are part of the market now, woven into its rhythm like one more thread in the rough fabric of medieval survival. The lane away from this market narrows again, leading you toward the sound of splashing water and low voices. The village well sits at its heart, not merely a hole in the ground, but the beating pulse of daily life. You approach and find a circle of stones worn smooth by countless hands and ropes, the wood of the winch darkened with age and use. A queue has already formed, women with baskets looped over their arms, children tugging at skirts, men pausing between tasks to take a turn at the rope. Every bucket pulled up feels like both a triumph and a necessity. Without it, nothing else can continue. The first thing you notice is how heavy the work is. A rope creaks as a young woman hauls on the handle, her arms taut with effort. When the bucket emerges, it sloshes over, spilling dark water onto her skirts. But she doesn't pause. She empties it into a waiting jug, ties the rope again, and lowers the bucket once more. The rhythm is relentless. Down, fill, heave, pour, repeat. You realize that a single household might need dozens of trips like this every day, and suddenly your modern grumbles about carrying groceries seem faintly embarrassing. You step closer and catch the mingled voices of gossip, as lively as the splash of water itself. One woman mutters about a neighbor's cow that trampled someone's garden. Another whispers a half-scandalous tale about the steward's nephew caught napping during prayers. Gossip, you realize, is another currency here, traded freely with laughter and sharp glances. The well isn't just about survival. It's the village's open-air newsstand, where no story is too small to share. The smell is its own mixture. Damp stone, the faint metallic tang of iron from the bucket, and an undercurrent of sourness from spilled water mingling with mud. The taste of the water, when you dare a sip, is earthy, as though the ground itself insists on leaving its signature. For villagers, this is simply life. For you, raised on filtered taps and plastic bottles, it is an unexpected encounter with the soil beneath your feet. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Wells were often communal property, maintained at the expense of the whole village. Their upkeep was a matter of survival, and disputes over access could escalate quickly. Some charters even specified penalties for contaminating the well. Throwing refuse into it was considered both dangerous and a serious crime. To poison a well, whether by accident or design, was to threaten the entire community. While you wait your turn, an older woman eyes you curiously. She clutches a wooden ladle carved into the shape of a bird's head, its beak worn smooth by years of lips. She offers you a sip without a word, and when you nod in thanks, she chuckles, revealing teeth stained dark. The ladle itself is more than functional. It's a touch of artistry, a reminder that even in hardship, people crave beauty. Your quirky tidbit of the day. Some medieval people believed that tossing a coin or even a piece of bread into a well could keep the water fresh. Whether this was an early form of superstition or the beginnings of our modern wishing well tradition is hard to say. You imagine villagers here, secretly slipping crumbs into the depths, hoping the spirits below were satisfied with such offerings. Children splash recklessly at the edges, their mothers scolding half-heartedly. One boy leans too far and nearly tumbles in, catching himself at the last moment with a squeal that sends ripples of laughter through the crowd. A thin dog laps eagerly at the puddles forming around the stones, tail wagging, while a girl tips a bucket slowly into a clay jar, twice her size. You can almost hear the collective sigh of shoulders lifting and arms stretching as the task is shared. As you stand there, rope rough against your palms, you reflect on how water shapes not just the body, but the social fabric. Every villager must come here, no matter their status, and the well becomes a rare equalizer. It is the place where the Lord's steward might stand in line behind a barefoot child, both waiting for the same element, both bound by the same need. Historians still argue whether this communal dependency softened social divisions or only highlighted them. But in this moment, the well feels like neutral ground, a rare democratic stage in a feudal world. You hoist your own bucket, surprised by the strain in your shoulders, the way the rope bites into your skin. The water sloshes heavily, dampening your tunic, soaking your legs with a chill that makes you shiver. Yet you carry it, step by slow step, imagining the countless mornings villagers have walked this same path. The weight is not just physical, it is tradition, continuity, survival carried in wooden vessels from the earth to the hearth. Nearby, a young woman hums softly as she balances two brimming buckets on a yoke across her shoulders. The melody is simple, almost childlike, but it threads through the bustle, calming and steady. You catch fragments of words, a prayer, a blessing, a reminder to be grateful for what the earth provides. It drifts into your mind like smoke, lingering long after she disappears down the lane. The sun climbs higher, casting stronger light across the square, and the well begins to empty of people. Chores await, meals must be prepared, fields tended, and animals fed. You remain for a moment longer, listening to the final creak of the rope, the soft splash as the last bucket rises. The stones gleam wetly, the air still cool around the circle, as though the well guards its own quiet dignity after the crowd disperses. You shoulder your water and head back along the lane, boots squelching in mud, arms trembling slightly with fatigue. But even through the ache, there is a strange satisfaction. You have shared in something deeply ordinary, profoundly necessary, and curiously timeless. The sound of the church bell carries faintly once more, a reminder that the day continues, that this rhythm, fetching, carrying, gossiping, surviving, will repeat endlessly, long after you drift away. And though your shoulders ache and your back is damp, you find yourself smiling, the weight of the bucket oddly grounding, as though tethering you more firmly to this borrowed life. The church bell fades, and the morning air carries you along a narrow track that curves toward the fields. The land opens wide, rolling out in uneven furrows, broken by hedges, small stone walls, and the occasional oak tree standing defiantly against the sky. Villagers march in clusters, some balancing tools on their shoulders, others guiding oxen with sharp calls. You are swept with them, boots squelching against mud, the smell of damp soil rising like a reminder that this is the true engine of survival. At first glance, the work seems simple. Push, pull, sow, reap. But the closer you come, the more intricate it reveals itself to be. Oxen strain against wooden yokes, pulling plows whose iron tips scrape grooves into the soil. Men lean heavily on handles, steering with practiced movements, sweat darkening their tunics even in the cool morning. Behind them, women and children drop seeds into the fresh furrows, covering them quickly with bare feet or crude hoes. The rhythm is steady, the pace demanding. You realize that to miss a season here means to starve, and suddenly, the urgency of their movements sharpens in your eyes. The smell is unmistakable. Earth freshly torn open, damp and raw. Worms squirm against the light. Birds swoop low to snatch them, wings flapping noisily. Your modern shoes, caked with mud already, feel absurdly fragile against this relentless ground. Yet the villagers barely notice their own dirt. Grime and soil cling to them like second skin, as natural as breath. A mainstream historical fact fits perfectly here. The heavy plow revolutionized European farming in the early Middle Ages. Unlike lighter tools, it could cut through dense clay soils of northern regions, turning once stubborn ground into productive farmland. This change transformed agriculture, spurring population growth and village expansion. You watch the blade cut deep, pulling ribbons of soil aside, and marvel at the sheer force required to tame the land. Nearby, goodbye, laughter erupts. A boy slips in the mud, his arm sinking to the elbow, and his friends roar with delight while his mother scolds half-heartedly. Humor bubbles here, despite the labor. Jokes are woven into the fabric of work. One man grins as he pretends to swap his bent hoe for a noble's sword, swinging it clumsily, earning cheers from his companions. The laughter feels timeless, as though every generation, no matter the century, has found ways to mock the grind. Your quirky tidbit of the day: medieval farmers sometimes sang bawdy songs to encourage their oxen to move faster. Imagine a soundtrack less about motivation and more about smirking camaraderie. The beasts may not have cared, but the farmers certainly did. It made the back-breaking hours a little lighter. You take up a wooden rake, awkward in your hands, and try to mimic the others. The wood bites into your palms, your shoulders ache after only minutes, and a villager chuckles knowingly. "Soft," he mutters in a dialect you almost catch, patting your arm as if forgiving you for your weakness. You grin sheepishly, recognizing the truth. Your body is out of place here, untrained for work that demands constant strength. As the sun climbs, sweat trickles down your temples. A woman wipes her brow with the back of her hand, then straightens, stretching her spine with a groan. Her child tugs at her sleeve, pointing toward the village, where thin smoke curls from chimneys, signaling the start of midday meals. She sighs, hefts her basket, and trudges back, the promise of bread and broth pulling her along. Work pauses briefly, but only briefly. The fields will not wait. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants worked longer hours than modern laborers. Some claim their days were punctuated with festivals and church holidays, giving more rest than the industrial grind that followed. Others insist the intensity of agricultural seasons, harvest especially, left no room for leisure. Watching the bent backs around you, it's hard to imagine much rest at all. And yet, here and there, someone pauses to wipe their hands, to share a joke, to glance at the sky. Perhaps the truth lies in the balance of necessity and stolen moments. You kneel, scooping a handful of soil. It crumbles, rich with the scent of life. Seeds scattered across it feel fragile, almost foolish in their smallness. And yet you know they will grow into the bread that fills every table. It's humbling, this chain of survival, so dependent on weather, luck, and ceaseless labor. A sudden shout breaks your reflection. An ox has veered off, dragging the plow into a shallow ditch. Men rush to steady it, voices sharp, hands pulling hard at the harness. The beast snorts, eyes rolling, but slowly steadies under their guidance. Calm returns, and one farmer laughs, brushing mud from his face, making light of what could have been disaster. You sense in that laughter both resilience and resignation. The land always pushes back. By late afternoon, the fields shimmer with heat. Tools clatter against stones. Bodies move more slowly, yet the rhythm persists. Dust rises in fine clouds, coating your skin with grit. The bell will ring again soon, calling everyone back to the village. But for now, the earth still demands. You wipe your brow, shoulders aching, and glance around at faces both weary and strangely serene. They know this dance, this endless exchange of labor for life. You are merely learning its first steps. As the sun tilts lower, shadows stretch long across the furrows. The oxen, steaming with sweat, are led back toward pens, their heads bowed, tails flicking tiredly. Tools are gathered, baskets emptied, seeds sown. The villagers trudge homeward, voices quieter now, their laughter replaced with the heavy silence of effort well spent. You follow them, legs trembling, realizing that you've taken part in something ancient, essential, and utterly ordinary. And as the last light fades, you glance back over the furrows, dark lines carved into the earth like verses of an unfinished story. Tomorrow, the work will begin again, and the day after, and the day after that. For now, though, you are content to leave the soil behind, carrying its scent on your skin, its weight in your bones. The path back into the village is still damp with mud, but the air has shifted since morning. Now the smells of food drift from hearths, mingling with the sharper tang of animals being led home from the edges of the fields. Children skip past, their laughter floating into the twilight, and you follow the flow of bodies toward the square. The rhythm of the day has turned toward something different. Bargaining, laughter, the lively thrum of market day. You realize that this is not just about exchanging goods, but about confirming one another's existence, reassuring each villager that they are part of something larger than themselves. The square is alive, buzzing with motion and noise. Wooden stalls line the perimeter, covered with rough cloth awnings that flap in the evening breeze. Torches have been driven into the earth, their flames sputtering in the wind and casting long, jittery shadows. The smells assault you first: roasting meat, freshly baked bread, herbs crushed beneath hurried feet, and the pungent sourness of animals tied nearby. Somewhere, Someone is frying onions in fat, and the aroma makes your stomach clench with longing. The hum of voices swells into a chorus, broken by bursts of laughter or the sharp cadence of a seller calling out prices. A baker displays dark loaves, their crusts dusted with flour. You lean closer, noticing that the bread feels heavier than what you know, dense with rye or barley. One man slices a chunk with a long knife, handing it over in exchange for a coin. The customer bites into it without hesitation, chewing slowly, nodding his approval. The bread is sustenance, not indulgence, yet the small satisfaction on his face is unmistakable. Across the way, a stall of woolen cloth flaps like banners. Browns and grays dominate, but a splash of red cloth catches your eye, dyed so bright it seems almost defiant. The merchant strokes it proudly, boasting of the expensive dye, claiming it was carried across mountains and seas. You know from your own memory of textbooks that crimson dyes came at great cost, often crushed from countless tiny insects. The merchant's words may be exaggerated, but the pride is genuine. A fiddler starts playing near the well, the music rough but enthusiastic. The tune is simple, easy for villagers to hum along to, and soon children dance in a ring, skirts swirling, bare feet stamping in the dirt. A man claps loudly in rhythm, and another slaps his knee as he sways to the beat. This is not entertainment in the polished sense, but communal joy, each note binding people together. You smile despite yourself, the music tugging at your feet, reminding you that even after a day of back-breaking work, laughter still has a place. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval markets were often protected by law, their existence guaranteed through charters issued by lords or kings. These charters gave villages certain privileges, ensuring that trade could happen under watchful protection. Disruptions were punished severely. Stability was essential for commerce to thrive. You sense that weight in the square, order lurking beneath the apparent chaos. The steward's men linger at the edges, eyes sharp, ensuring that disputes do not boil over into something worse. Speaking of disputes, you stumble upon one near a stall of smoked fish. Two men argue heatedly, one accusing the other of tampering with scales to cheat customers. The crowd circles quickly, eager for drama. Voices rise, accusations sharpen, and for a moment it seems fists might fly. Then the steward himself steps in, his tone stern, his presence commanding. The crowd murmurs, tension bleeding away as quickly as it gathered. Justice, or at least the appearance of it, has been served. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some markets once hired ale tasters, officials tasked with sampling local brews to ensure quality. Imagine being paid to drink beer in the name of public service. Though you don't see such an official here, the thought makes you grin, especially when you pass a barrel where frothy ale is being ladled into clay mugs. A group of men raise theirs in a loud toast, the foam spilling onto their tunics as they laugh. You suspect none of them would mind a job description that included unlimited samples. The smells shift again as you wander. Leather freshly tanned, sharp enough to sting your nose. Honey glistening in small clay pots, sticky under the torchlight. Bundles of dried herbs sold with whispered promises of healing or luck. A woman beckons you closer, showing bundles tied with string, her voice soft as she describes their uses: chamomile for calm, sage for protection, thyme for coughs. You nod, though you wonder how much is knowledge and how much is hope. Historians still argue whether such herbalists were respected healers or tolerated with suspicion. But here, her stall is busy, and her customers leave with grateful smiles. You pause by a cage where geese honk indignantly, their wings flapping against the bars. One child pokes a finger through, only to pull back quickly with a yelp as a beak snaps shut. Laughter follows, not unkind, but communal, as though every goose-related mishap is part of the market's entertainment. You can't help chuckling, even as the child scowls. The evening grows darker, torches sputtering more brightly, and the market hum deepens into a steady throb. People are louder now, looser, perhaps from ale, perhaps from the relief of a day done. The fiddler plays faster, joined now by a drum, and the rhythm quickens hearts. Couples dance clumsily, their movements uneven, but full of joy. Children chase one another in circles, their shadows stretching long across the ground. For a moment you forget the hardships of fields and wells. The square feels alive, warm and generous. You buy a small honey cake, its sweetness clinging to your fingers, the taste rich and unexpected after so much plain bread. The sugar grains crunch faintly between your teeth, a reminder of rare indulgence. You savor it slowly, letting the sweetness anchor you in the swirl of noise and smell. This, too, is survival. Not only feeding the body, but also feeding the spirit. As the night deepens, some stalls close, their owners packing goods into carts. Others linger, reluctant to leave the glow of torches and the comfort of company. The steward's men make another slow pass, ensuring peace is kept. The fiddler, now hoarse, lowers his bow, while the drummer taps one last fading beat. Slowly, the hum of voices lessens, replaced by the softer sounds of villagers walking home, baskets lighter, hearts perhaps a little lighter too. You stand still, letting the square empty around you. The torches crackle softly, their light flickering against empty stalls, casting shadows that stretch toward the darkened lanes. Your body is tired, your skin sticky with sweat and dust, but your mind feels oddly awake. The market has shown you something vital. Survival here is not only about toil in fields, but also about gathering, sharing, laughing, and reminding one another that life, though heavy, has sparks of sweetness. You turn at last, following the trail of villagers back toward the lane, the sound of their voices fading into the distance. Behind you, the square settles into silence, only the faint hiss of dying torches keeping watch. Ahead, the promise of night rests, ready to fold you once more into straw and shadow. The crowd drifts away from the square, voices softening into the deeper hush of evening. You find yourself drawn with them, guided by the glow of lanterns swinging from crooked beams and the soft warmth spilling out from doorways. The air has changed again, less of smoke and sweat, more of firelight and the yeasty tang of brewing ale. The path leads you to a low building near the edge of the lane, its roof sagging under thatch, its door wide open to welcome anyone seeking food, drink, or company. This is the alehouse, the true living room of the village, where stories and laughter rise thick as steam. The first step inside surrounds you with warmth. Smoke curls from a central hearth, its flames licking upward and throwing golden light across rough wooden tables. Benches scrape as villagers shift to make room for newcomers. A hound stretches lazily near the fire, opening one eye to watch you before sinking back into sleep. The smell here is layered: roasted meat, sour ale, damp wool, and the faint trace of wood resin burning. It is not pleasant in the clean sense, but it is enveloping, a cocoon against the night's chill. You sit at a bench, the wood sticky from years of spilled drink, and a clay mug is pushed into your hands. The liquid sloshes, frothy at the edges, and you take a cautious sip. The ale is cloudy, tart, and oddly satisfying. This is not the refined drink of modern breweries. It is thicker, almost a meal in itself. Villagers depend on it daily. Water is too often unsafe. But ale, boiled and brewed, carries fewer risks. A mainstream historical fact. Ale, especially the lighter, small ale, was consumed by everyone, children included. It was nourishment, hydration, and modest comfort, rolled into one. Across the room, voices swell into story. An old man leans forward, eyes shining in the firelight, spinning a tale about a saint who turned wolves into meek lambs with a single prayer. Children sit wide-eyed, gasping at each twist, while adults chuckle knowingly at the exaggerations. Another voice rises, younger, telling a sly tale of a trickster who stole a nobleman's horse and replaced it with a donkey in a cloak. The listeners roar with laughter, slapping tables, spilling drink. Jokes like this are timeless. The delight in watching the mighty made foolish stretches across centuries. Your quirky tidbit for the night. Some medieval taverns were known to use bread trenchers as plates. Diners would scoop food onto thick slabs of stale bread, which soaked up the juices and could then be eaten or tossed to beggars and dogs. Imagine modern restaurants offering you a plate you're expected to chew afterward. Practical, yes, but perhaps not Michelin star material. Here, however, nothing is wasted. The ale loosens tongues, and gossip flows with the drink. A man whispers about higher taxes rumored for next season, his brow furrowed. A woman laughs about a pig who escaped its pen and ended up in the churchyard, scattering worshippers. Someone mentions a wandering minstrel seen on the road, carrying news from faraway towns. Every story, small or large, finds its place in this smoky room. Historians still argue whether alehouses were primarily for leisure or for the vital exchange of information. But sitting here, you sense it is both. This is how a village keeps itself stitched together. The fire pops, sending sparks into the air. Shadows dance across beams overhead, and you realize the room is alive in more than sound. It moves, shifts, breathes. A fiddler pulls out a small instrument, bowing a simple tune. The melody winds its way through the chatter, pulling claps and stomps into rhythm. A girl, her braids swinging, dares a dance step, and laughter encourages her to continue. Soon others join, feet stomping against the packed earth floor, hands clapping in sync. It is rough, uneven, and absolutely joyous. Your body relaxes into the rhythm. The mug warms in your hand, the fire warms your skin, and the stories warm your mind. You watch faces glow red with drink and laughter, noting the wrinkles etched by years of toil. These people live hard lives, yet in this moment, they shine with a vitality that feels eternal. The alehouse is not escape, but renewal, a nightly reminder that community carries them through. Outside, the night deepens. A cold draft snakes through the doorway, carrying the scent of damp earth. A man stumbles out, chuckling, his arm draped around a friend's shoulder. The rest remain, their voices steady, unwilling to let the night end too quickly. You feel drowsy, lulled by the cadence of stories and the soft buzz of ale. Your eyelids grow heavy, but you resist, unwilling to miss a single word. The storyteller begins another tale, this one darker. A warning about spirits in the woods, figures with glowing eyes, who lead wanderers astray. The children lean closer, gripping one another's hands. Adults nod gravely, though some smirk as if to say they've heard this all before. Still, A shiver runs through the room, as though even the fire hesitates for a breath. Stories here are more than entertainment. They are guides, warnings, tools of survival. The fiddler changes tune. Lighter now, chasing away the shadows. The rhythm returns, laughter follows, and the fear dissolves into cheer. A woman clinks mugs with her neighbor, toasting the saints, the harvest, and perhaps just the fact that they've survived another day. You raise your mug as well, part of the ritual now, and drink deeply. The ale is rough, but the gesture is smooth, a bridge across centuries, binding you to them. The hour grows late. Voices drop, one by one, as people drift homeward. Bench is empty. Mugs stand abandoned. The fiddler tucks his instrument away. The fire burns low, its glow softer now, coaxing you toward rest. The hound stretches again, yawns wide, and curls back into the warmth. You take one last sip, letting the taste linger, then rise unsteadily, your body heavy with fatigue. Stepping outside, the night air chills you instantly. Stars prick the sky, faint and scattered, their light barely reaching the ground. The village is quieter now, only the distant cry of an owl breaking the silence. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with cold air, and glance back at the alehouse. Its door closes slowly, the fire's glow dimming, until only the night remains. You walk toward your borrowed bed of straw, the stories echoing in your mind, the laughter still warm on your skin. Tomorrow will bring more labor, more struggle. But tonight has offered something else: fellowship, laughter, and the reminder that even in the hardest times, people find reasons to gather. Morning breaks with a muted gray light, and the air hangs heavy with dampness. The fields may have claimed your muscles the day before, but today, the center of the village pulls you toward another kind of gathering. Villagers cluster in groups, whispering and gesturing nervously toward the manor house that rises above the thatched roofs. Its timber frame and stone foundations seem almost arrogant against the modest cottages below, and you sense an undercurrent of unease. Word spreads quickly. The steward will hold court today, hearing disputes and delivering judgments on behalf of the Lord. You are swept along with the crowd, curiosity tugging at your steps. The manor's hall is larger than any village dwelling, but not grand in the way of later castles. Its walls are rough stone, lined with tapestries faded from smoke, their colors muted, but their scenes still fierce. Hunts, battles, saints with stern faces. The air smells of wax, wood smoke, and damp straw trodden underfoot. At the far end, the steward sits in a carved chair that mimics a throne, though he is not lord, but merely servant, wielding borrowed authority. His presence fills the room nonetheless, shoulders square, eyes sharp, a ledger resting at his side like a silent witness. The first case is small, yet vital. A farmer steps forward, cap in hand, accusing his neighbor of stealing a sheaf of barley from his field. Voices rise, each man gesturing wildly. The steward listens, frowning, his fingers drumming on the armrest. Finally, he declares that the accused must pay restitution, not in coin, scarce as it is, but in 2 hens and a measure of oats. The villagers murmur approval, or at least acceptance. Justice in this world is measured not by lofty ideals, but by maintaining balance. A mainstream historical fact slips neatly here. Manor courts were a cornerstone of feudal society, binding peasants to their lords not only through taxes, but also through legal dependence. Serious crimes were escalated elsewhere, but daily quarrels, stolen grain, wandering livestock, unpaid debts, were resolved here, in rooms heavy with smoke and expectation. This was governance at ground level, intimate and immediate. The next dispute draws more whispers. A woman accuses her neighbor of letting his pigs trample her garden. The man protests, claiming the fence was weak and not his fault. The steward listens, expression unreadable, before decreeing that the man must repair the fence and provide the woman with a basket of beans as compensation. The woman bows stiffly, satisfied. The man scowls, but bows as well. The balance holds. Your quirky tidbit for this setting. In some places, manor courts required defendants to bring objects like sticks or stones as tokens to represent their pledge to appear. Forgetting your court stick could be as serious as the accusation itself. Imagine modern courtrooms demanding you bring a pebble to prove your sincerity. It would certainly liven up the docket. The hall continues to buzz with cases. A boy is caught fishing in the Lord's stream without permission. His father pleads on his behalf, promising service in exchange for mercy. The steward considers, then agrees, sentencing the boy to carry wood for the manor's hearth for a fortnight. A small punishment, but also a reminder: all land, water, and forest belong to the Lord, and every blade of grass carries obligation. Historians still argue whether peasants viewed such courts as oppressive or as essential mediators. Some see them as instruments of exploitation, others as necessary anchors that prevented chaos. Standing here, you feel the tension, resentment simmering beneath bowed heads, yet also a reluctant reliance. Without this authority, disputes could spiral into violence. With it, life continues, heavy but ordered. The steward pauses to sip from a goblet, his ledger open beside him. Names, fines, dues, all recorded in neat script, binding the village not only in memory, but in ink. The scratching quill, faint but steady, feels almost louder than the voices. This is how power endures, not only through commands spoken, but through words written, preserved beyond argument. Another case rises. Two brothers quarrel over inheritance, their father recently dead. Land is scarce, and dividing it could mean survival for one, ruin for the other. The steward listens, weighs their pleas, and finally rules that the land must remain intact. But both brothers must share the work and yield. Their faces twist with frustration, yet they nod. The murmur of villagers suggests approval. Better a compromise than another plot splintered too thin to feed a family. By the time the court adjourns, the hall feels thick with exhaustion. Villagers shuffle out, voices low, shoulders sagging under both relief and resentment. You follow, stepping into the cooler air, grateful for the open sky after the smoky chamber. The manor looms behind you, its presence undeniable, a constant reminder of hierarchy. Yet the lane ahead hums with renewed energy. Life resumes, chores waiting, gossip already reshaped by the morning's judgments. As you walk back toward the village, you reflect on what you've witnessed. Justice here is not about right or wrong in the modern sense, but about balance, order, and ensuring the Lord's control remains unshaken. It is survival dressed as fairness, ritual cloaked in authority. And though the villagers may grumble, they accept it, because the alternative, chaos, unchecked conflict, feels far worse. The path narrows again, hedged by cottages, the chatter of villagers spilling into the open. You catch fragments, relief at one ruling, anger at another, laughter at the idea of a pig becoming legal testimony. The court has ended, but its echoes will ripple through the village for days, reshaping alliances, deepening feuds, and weaving another thread into the fabric of communal life. You pause by the well, the circle of stones damp from morning use. Children dart past, chasing each other with shrieks of glee. A woman bends to fill her bucket, humming softly. The rhythm of daily life continues, even after the weight of judgment. Perhaps that is the true success of the court. Not fairness, but continuity. The church bell rings once more, its sound rolling across the fields. Villagers glance upward briefly, then return to their tasks. The fields wait. The animals wait. Hunger waits. Judgment has been given. Debts measured. Fines assigned. But the rhythm of survival calls louder than any steward. You lean against the cool stone, letting the sound wash over you, feeling the weight of this strange system settle into your bones. And as the bell fades, you know the night will bring stories of these rulings, told with laughter, anger, or resignation by firelight. The court may have ended, but the tales will keep it alive, shaping memory and expectation. You take a breath, ready to follow those stories into the dusk. Evening drifts in again, soft and slow, and the square begins to hum in a different way. The market stalls have packed away, the steward has closed his ledger, and the fields lie silent beneath the fading light. What remains is the alehouse, the fire, and the irresistible pull of stories. You find yourself drawn back, feet moving almost without thought, toward the doorway where laughter leaks into the street. Inside, shadows dance on timber beams, and smoke coils lazily upward. The benches are full again, mugs foaming, and the warmth of companionship wraps around you like a blanket. This time, the mood feels looser, richer, even a little mischievous. The first story comes from a broad-shouldered man with a booming voice who leans forward dramatically, his mug raised as though to bless the crowd. He tells of a saint who once tamed a wild boar by whispering scripture into its ear. The children gasp, eyes wide, while adults exchange knowing smiles. Whether the tale is true hardly matters. It carries the rhythm of faith, wrapped in a spectacle that entertains all at once. The storyteller slams his mug down with a flourish, drawing cheers. Another voice rises quickly, younger and cheekier. This tale shifts from saintly miracles to trickster mischief, about a farmer who disguised his goat as a knight to sneak into the manor's feast. The image sparks roaring laughter, mugs sloshing, and even the hound by the fire thumps its tail, as though it, too, understands the joke. The tale ends with the goat eating the Lord's prized apples, a detail that earns howls of delight. You grin, recognizing the timeless joy in mocking authority through safe, exaggerated fables. Here lies your mainstream historical fact. Taverns and alehouses were not simply places of drink, but vital hubs of oral culture. Stories, news, songs, and jokes spread from hearth to hearth, keeping memory alive where books could not reach. For most villagers, this was their library, their stage, their newspaper. Every tale told here could outlive its teller, carried to the next village by a passing merchant or a wandering minstrel. The fiddler strikes up a tune, bow scraping across strings with uneven skill but undeniable energy. A young woman claps along, and soon the rhythm seeps into the floor itself, boots and bare feet tapping in sync. Children spin in clumsy circles, their laughter mingling with the music, while older villagers nod along, too tired to dance, but unwilling to miss the moment. Music in this world isn't for performance alone. It's for participation, a shared pulse in a life dominated by labor. You sip your mug, the ale still cloudy and rough, yet it warms you with surprising speed. Beside you, a gray-haired woman leans in to tell a quieter story. This one about a wandering pilgrim who tricked the devil by hiding in a hollow tree. Her voice is raspy but compelling, and the room falls into a hush as she spins her tale. When she ends with the pilgrim escaping to build a chapel on the hill, the crowd murmurs approval, some crossing themselves reflexively. The fire pops, sending sparks upward as if to punctuate her ending. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some regions, storytellers were paid not in coin, but in food or drink. A particularly skilled tale could earn a loaf of bread, a slice of meat, or an extra mug of ale. You glance around the room and suspect the booming man from earlier has secured more than a few free meals in his day. The economy of story, after all, is as practical as it is entertaining. As the night deepens, the stories grow bolder. A young boy, no older than 10, clambers onto a bench and begins an impromptu tale about a fox who outwitted a priest. His gestures are wild, his words tangled, but the crowd cheers him on. The priest in the corner raises an eyebrow, but even he smiles faintly, perhaps enjoying the parody. In this smoky room, the barriers of authority soften. Laughter levels the field. Historians still argue whether alehouses offered a space of resistance or merely a harmless vent for frustrations. Were jokes about lords and priests genuine rebellion, or just safe entertainment that kept discontent contained? Sitting here, you sense both. The laughter is cathartic, but beneath it lies a whisper of what-ifs. What if pigs could truly raid gardens without consequence? What if a goat could humiliate a knight? What if ordinary villagers could rewrite the world through laughter? The fire burns lower, its glow deepening into red embers. Shadows stretch longer, wrapping the room in intimacy. Someone begins a slow ballad, voice low and wavering, recounting a tragic love lost to the sea. The room softens, mugs quiet, as listeners sway gently, drawn into the sadness. The ballad ends with a sigh, and silence holds for a moment before mugs lift again in quiet toasts. The stories here are not only for laughter, they are also vessels for grief, remembrance, and the aching weight of mortality. You glance at the faces around you, lined, weary, flushed with drink, and see a tapestry of resilience. These people rise before dawn, labor through the fields, pay dues to lords, and fear sickness that can arrive without warning. Yet here, by firelight, they reclaim themselves through story. This is their wealth, the ability to weave words into shields against despair. The fiddler resumes, softer now, playing a tune that feels like the night itself. Steady, slow, almost like breathing. The villagers lean into one another, shoulders touching, eyes half closed. You feel yourself sinking too, lulled by the warmth, the rhythm, the stories lingering like smoke. Eventually, one by one, they drift away. Benches scrape, doors creak, voices fade into the night air. The embers crackle quietly, glowing in the near darkness. You linger a moment longer, letting the stories echo in your mind, the laughter still ringing faintly. Then you step outside, the chill of the night wrapping around you. The village is hushed now, roofs outlined against the starlit sky. The square lies empty, the well silent, the field stretching dark beyond. You walk slowly, your breath visible in the cold air, and settle once more into your bed of straw. Shadows curl along the rafters, but the warmth of the alehouse lingers in your bones. You close your eyes, the stories looping in your thoughts, knowing they will outlast even the fire that birthed them. The harvest begins with a restlessness you can feel in your bones. Before dawn, the air thrums with anticipation, the scent of dew clinging to stalks of grain, the faint rustle of scythes being sharpened in steady, rasping strokes. You rise with the villagers, drawn into their urgency. This is not just another day of toil. It is the culmination of months of labor, the hinge on which survival swings. The fields stretch golden and heavy, their heads bowed under the weight of ripeness. Men and women line the edges, scythes glinting faintly in the early light. At a signal, they move together, sweeping blades in long arcs. The sound is mesmerizing. A steady swish, a pause, another swish. The stalks fall rhythmically, piling into heaps. Sweat beads instantly on brows. Shirts cling damp to backs, but the pace never falters. Grain waits for no one. Behind the scythe bearers, others gather and bundle, tying sheaves with quick, practiced hands. Children dart between, carrying water, chasing birds that dare to swoop down for easy pickings. Even elders hobble out, stooping to gather stray stalks, unwilling to waste what might become bread in winter. Every hand contributes because every belly depends on it. Your mainstream historical fact: harvest was the most critical season of the agricultural calendar. Villages often owed a portion of their yield to the lord or church, meaning families had to gather enough to cover dues while still feeding themselves. Failure meant hunger, sometimes famine. Watching the relentless movement, you sense that no moment is casual. Each bundle gathered is a victory against scarcity. Hours pass in relentless rhythm. The sun climbs, burning mist from the fields, and backs curve deeper under its heat. Laughter still bubbles occasionally, carried on fatigue. One man calls out a teasing rhyme about another's crooked swing, and the women laugh, their voices carrying across the grain. Humor softens the exhaustion, even as arms ache and knees stiffen. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some communities left a small patch of grain standing at the end of harvest, calling it the neck or the corn spirit. It was cut ceremoniously, sometimes woven into a doll, or offered in thanks to ensure fertility for the next season. You imagine these villagers, later tonight, tying the last sheaf with ribbons, treating it not as scraps, but as sacred insurance for tomorrow. By midday, the fields hum with heat. Children collapse in shade, gulping weak ale from clay mugs. Women hand out chunks of bread, coarse and crumbly, dipped into broth carried in pots. The meal is brief, practical. Stomachs filled just enough to return to work. A boy sneaks a berry from a hedgerow, his face stained purple, and his mother smacks the back of his head, though she smiles despite herself. Historians still argue whether harvest was more burden or celebration. Some describe it as back-breaking necessity, others as a time of communal joy, a festival hidden inside labor. Standing here, sweat stinging your eyes, you sense both. Fatigue pressing into every joint, and yet an undercurrent of pride, of togetherness. Each scythe stroke is heavy, but also shared. As the day fades, heaps of grain rise tall, casting long shadows. The work slows, but not the energy, because after the toil comes the feast. Villagers return to the square, muscles groaning, faces streaked with dirt, yet voices buoyed by expectation. Fires are stoked, pots bubble with stews of meat and vegetables, and someone sets aside a barrel of ale larger than a child. The scent alone is enough to coax tired feet back into motion. The square transforms. Torches are lit, music rises, and laughter spills freely. Tables groan under bread, cheese, fruit, and whatever small luxuries could be spared. Children chase one another through the smoke, their squeals punctuating the thrum of drums and fiddles. Men slap shoulders, women laugh loudly, and mugs clink in countless toasts. Tonight, hunger is forgotten, at least for a while. You bite into roasted meat, the juices dripping, the flavor rich in a way rare for common meals. Bread tastes sweeter after such work, ale more satisfying. The exhaustion that weighed you down in the field now feels strangely lightened, replaced by warmth from food, fire, and companionship. Stories rise again, but tonight they feel sharper, louder. A man acts out the stumbling of an ox, drawing howls of laughter. A girl sings a song about a sly fox, her high voice carrying above the crowd. A fiddler plays until his bowstrings fray, joined by clapping hands and stamping feet. The dance begins, uneven but joyous, villagers whirling despite blistered feet and weary bones. For a moment, you forget your place as an outsider. You clap, you laugh, you sip, you sway. Caught in the momentum of survival turned into celebration, you realize this is the essence of medieval life, not a balance of hardship and joy, but their fusion. Work and feast are inseparable. One births the other. As the fire crackles high, sparks chasing the stars, you lean back, the warmth soaking into your skin. Around you, faces glow with pride, joy, and the rare indulgence of abundance. Tomorrow, labor resumes. Dues will be paid, winter will loom, hunger will whisper again. But tonight, the harvest feast claims the square, and for a few fleeting hours, the village belongs not to the Lord, nor to the church, but to itself. The warmth of the harvest feast lingers only briefly. Soon enough, the seasons shift, the days shorten, and winter presses its chill into the marrow of every moment. You wake one morning to the sound of wind rattling shutters and the feel of damp air heavy against your face. The fields that once shimmered with gold now lie barren, stalks broken and dark. The ground frozen hard beneath thin patches of snow. The village exhales into survival mode, every task bent toward enduring the long, gray months. You wrap yourself in layers of coarse wool, scratchy against your skin, but essential against the cold. The hearth is never quite enough. Its smoke curls up through the rafters, leaving soot to stain beams black, yet its warmth barely reaches your fingers. Families huddle close, bodies pressed together. The breath of animals penned nearby mingling with human warmth. Practicality replaces pride. Pigs, chickens, sometimes even calves, share the same roof as their keepers, their heat part of the household survival strategy. The smell is ripe, but the warmth is undeniable. Food becomes the center of every thought. Dried beans rattle in storage jars, salted fish stiff in barrels, grain ground into dense loaves of bread that last longer than anyone would prefer. Meals are repetitive, sometimes gruel-flavored only with hope. A mainstream historical fact underscores the point. Winter was often the most dangerous season in medieval Europe. Crop failures, harsh frosts, and disease could turn a lean larder into a death sentence. Survival rates hinged on careful storage and on weather beyond human control. You sit by the fire as a woman carefully doles out portions, her movements precise, almost ceremonial. A crust of bread for each child, a ladle of broth for the workers, the rest tucked away. No one complains. though stomachs grumble audibly. Hunger becomes background noise, as constant as the winds howl outside. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed onions hung from rafters could ward off illness during the cold months. Entire homes dangled strings of them, like pungent garlands, half medicine, half superstition. You glance upward, imagining the smell of so many onions mingling with smoke and livestock, effective against spirits perhaps, but brutal on the nose. Despite the hardship, there are moments of strange peace. Snow muffles sound, laying a soft hush over the village. Children bundle in wool scraps, sliding across icy patches with squeals of delight. Their laughter rings sharp against the silence, a reminder that joy can bloom even in the harshest cold. Women gather to spin wool by firelight, fingers nimble despite the chill, their low chatter weaving another rhythm of community. Men mend tools or carve wood, shaping handles, bowls, or even toys. Time slows, but life does not stop. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had more leisure in winter than in summer. Some claim the lull in farming offered time for crafts, stories, and even a kind of rest. Others insist the constant pressure of hunger and chores made true leisure impossible. Watching the villagers around you, you sense both sides are right. The work changes shape, but the urgency never vanishes. Survival is always the quiet partner in every task. Nights stretch long, and with them come stories. Around the hearth, villagers recount tales of ancestors who endured harsher winters, of saints who brought miracles in times of famine, of spirits who roamed in snowstorms, searching for careless wanderers. The children press close, half thrilled, half terrified, their faces lit by firelight. You listen too, noting how stories here are not idle entertainment, but tools, warnings, lessons, comforts woven together to carry the village through endless nights. The wind batters walls, snow drifts against doors, and sometimes the silence of the village is broken only by the crack of ice splitting on the river. Travel is rare, risky, and usually avoided. The world shrinks to the size of the hearth's glow, the circle of family and neighbors. Your body longs for sun, for fields, for the bustle of markets. But instead, you learn the quiet endurance of waiting. Illness creeps easily in such conditions. A cough echoes in one corner, spreading through the cramped space within days. Remedies are scarce. Herbs brewed into teas, prayers whispered over foreheads, charms tied around necks. Some recover, some do not. Death in winter is accepted grimly, mourned with quiet rituals, but rarely surprising. You see the resilience etched into villagers' faces, their ability to mourn, then move, because the living still need feeding. Yet even here, small sparks of celebration flicker. On feast days, a loaf of bread is shared with more generosity, ale poured a little more freely. A candle might be lit in the church, glowing against the darkness, reminding everyone of hope beyond the season. The villagers cling to these rituals, not as luxury, but as necessity. Without them, the cold might swallow spirit as well as body. You step outside one evening, snow crunching beneath your boots, the village bathed in moonlight, the roofs shimmer under frost, the sky pricked with stars sharp enough to cut. The air burns your lungs, yet the beauty is undeniable. Quiet, stark, immense. For a moment, the hardship fades, replaced by awe at the stillness of this frozen world. You pull your cloak tighter, but you smile. Even winter, with all its cruelty, offers moments of wonder. As you return to the warmth of the hearth, the door closing behind you, The hum of voices rises again. Stories resume, hands busy with work. Laughter cracks against the weight of hunger. Winter has not won. Not yet. The villagers endure as they always have, clinging to one another, to ritual, to the faint promise that spring will return. And you, though weary, find yourself woven into that endurance, another thread in the tapestry of survival. The first hints of spring arrive not with warmth, but with change in the air, a dampness that smells of thawing earth, the slow drip of melting frost from thatched roofs, and the restless movements of villagers who can sense the world stirring again. You wake to the sound of wheels creaking on the lane, not the familiar carts of locals, but heavier ones, laden with unfamiliar goods. A stranger has arrived, a traveling merchant, his cloak dusted from distant roads, his cart piled high with fabrics, trinkets, and spices that smell like another world entirely. The village gathers quickly, curiosity outweighing suspicion. Children trail at the edges, wide-eyed, while adults cluster closer, voices buzzing with speculation. The merchant's presence is both disruption and delight. He pulls back the canvas cover of his cart to reveal bolts of cloth in colors, brighter than anything the villagers wear. Deep blues, warm oranges, and a purple so rare it seems almost sinful. He sets down jars of strange powders, their scents sharp and sweet, and produces small mirrors that catch the light like captured stars. The smell of his wares is intoxicating. Spices, pepper, cinnamon, perhaps even cloves, spill their fragrance into the air, mingling with the more familiar smoke and dung of the village. Your stomach reacts instantly, craving flavors you barely remember from your own time. Bread dipped in broth has carried you through the winter, but the promise of spice awakens something sharper, hungrier. A mainstream historical fact anchors the scene. Traveling merchants were essential links between isolated villages and the wider world. They carried not only goods, but also news, fashions, and ideas from faraway lands. Their presence meant access to luxury otherwise unreachable, though at costs few villagers could afford. The merchant knows this, his smile practiced, his patter smooth as he unfurls each treasure. You edge closer, catching snippets of bargaining. A woman offers eggs in exchange for a handful of pepper. A man suggests a half sack of grain for a strip of cloth, his voice hopeful but uncertain. The merchant shakes his head, gestures broadly, insists on silver. Few here have coin. Barter is the only language most can speak. Yet the haggling is lively, spirited, part performance, part necessity. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some merchants were rumored to carry unicorn horns for sale, usually the tusks of narwhals brought from the far north. Buyers believed these horns could purify poisoned drinks. You glance at the cart, half expecting to see one displayed, though today's merchant seems more practical, more cautious in what he shows. Still, the thought lingers. How many villagers once clutched narwhal tusks as talismans against death? The merchant also carries stories, and he knows how to wield them. As villagers finger his wares, he recounts tales of cities where towers scrape the sky, of ships larger than fields, of lands where the sun burns so hot that people walk with cloths over their heads. His words paint pictures brighter than any tapestry, drawing gasps and laughter. The children hang on his every syllable, while the adults exchange skeptical glances. Historians still argue whether merchants exaggerated wildly, or whether their tales offered genuine glimpses of far-off places. Perhaps both were true, depending on the teller's purse and the listener's imagination. You find yourself drawn to a small object tucked at the edge of the cart. A comb carved from bone, its surface etched with delicate patterns. It feels both ordinary and exquisite, a reminder that beauty is not always grand. The merchant notices your gaze and smiles knowingly, naming a price that would empty your pockets. You shake your head, but the image lingers, as though you've touched not just an object, but a piece of someone else's story. The bargaining continues until the steward arrives, flanked by 2 men. His presence shifts the mood instantly. He inspects the goods with practiced eyes, selects a bolt of cloth and a jar of spice, and pays in silver from the Lord's purse. The villagers watch, some with envy, others with resignation. The best goods, as always, drift upward toward the manor. Still, a few humble trades succeed. An onion string for a pouch of salt, a carved spoon for a length of ribbon. For these villagers, even the smallest fragment of the wider world is treasure. The merchant lingers until dusk, his cart surrounded, his voice never tiring. He knows that every moment counts, that tomorrow he will be gone down another road, to another village hungry for novelty. As the sun sets, torches flare, and he performs one last flourish, producing a small vial of powder that bursts into sparks when tossed into the fire. The children scream with delight, adults murmur in awe, and for a brief moment, the square feels enchanted. When the merchant finally departs, the village exhales, murmuring, laughing, touching new ribbons, or inhaling unfamiliar spices. The cart rattles away into the dark, its lantern swinging, leaving only the smell of pepper and the echo of stories behind. As you walk back toward your hut, you reflect on the strange balance merchants bring. They remind villagers of a wider world, full of danger, riches, and marvels. But they also remind them of distance, of how small their lives are in comparison. The merchant's goods may linger in homes for years, treasured, but his tales will linger longer, carried on tongues until reshaped into legend. The hearth smoke rises once more as families retreat indoors. You settle into straw, the memory of spices clinging to your nose, the spark powder's light still flashing behind your eyes. Outside, the road stretches endlessly, leading to lands you may never see. But tonight, you have brushed against them through a stranger's cart. Sleep pulls at your eyelids, and the rattle of wheels fades into dream. Morning comes with a low mist clinging to the village fields, the air damp and heavy with the smell of earth. You hear a different kind of bell today, softer, measured, drifting across the landscape from the direction of a walled stone building on the hillside. Curious villagers look toward it only briefly, for they know its sound well. It is the monastery calling its brothers to prayer, and for you, it is a new rhythm, a summons to learning, order, and a strange kind of quiet power. You walk the track toward the building, noting how it stands apart from the village. Thick walls, narrow windows, a roof tiled instead of thatched. The gate creaks as you step inside, and the world feels altered. The noise of the village fades, replaced by the hush of gravel underfoot and the distant sound of chanting. The air smells of beeswax, parchment, and herbs from the cloister garden. The monks move silently, their woolen habits brushing stone, their faces pale in the dim light. Inside, the scriptorium waits. Long wooden tables stretch beneath narrow windows, their surfaces crowded with parchment, quills, and pots of ink. Monks bend low over their work, their breaths controlled, their hands steady as they copy line after line. The scratching of quills fills the room, a soft chorus of persistence. You lean closer to one page, and see lines of Latin text, letters adorned with tiny flourishes. To your eyes, it is both art and labor, each stroke holding weight. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monasteries were the keepers of knowledge during the medieval period, copying texts not only of scripture, but of medicine, philosophy, and even fragments of ancient Greek and Roman thought. Without these slow, steady scribes, much of what we know today might have been lost. Watching their careful work, you understand how patience itself became a kind of devotion. Yet there is quirkiness here too. A monk sneezes suddenly, splattering ink across his page. He groans softly, muttering, and another chuckles, whispering about gremlins of the quill. Some manuscripts bear real doodles in their margins. Tiny rabbits with swords, grotesque faces pulling tongues, monks poking fun at themselves. You imagine the long hours bending over parchment breeding both discipline and mischief. The thought makes you grin. Even in sacred labor, humanity slips through. The abbot passes silently, his gaze stern, his pace deliberate. The monks straighten instinctively, though their quills keep moving. His presence is heavy, like a reminder that discipline sustains the order, that every letter is not just ink, but prayer. He stops at a younger monk's desk, nods once at the neat lines, and moves on. The boy flushes with pride, his hand steadier now. Recognition, even in this cloistered world, still matters. You wander into the cloister garden, a square of green framed by stone arches. The air smells fresher here, filled with sage, rosemary and lavender. A monk kneels, tending plants with careful hands, his lips moving silently, as though each leaf carries a prayer. He gestures to jars lined along a bench. Infusions, ointments, remedies for fever, coughs, and wounds. Herbal knowledge thrives here. Half science, half faith. You sip a tea offered to you, its bitterness sharp, and your throat feels soothed instantly. Historians still argue whether monasteries hoarded knowledge selfishly or preserved it selflessly. Were their walls built to protect wisdom from a chaotic world, or to guard power for their own use? Standing here, you sense both. The calm feels protective, but also possessive. Knowledge is life, and life is guarded. You step into the library, its shelves lined with volumes bound in leather, their spines cracked, their pages thick with age. The smell of parchment and dust envelops you, both comforting and overwhelming. One book lies open on a stand, its illuminations glowing with gold leaf, saints shimmering in jewel-colored robes. It is breathtaking, though you know how many days, weeks, perhaps months went into its creation. To hold it is to hold time itself. A monk nearby whispers a story about the making of parchment, how it begins as an animal's skin, scraped, stretched, and dried until smooth. The thought is unsettling, yet the result is beautiful. Every page here is both flesh and word, body and idea. You stroke the surface gently, humbled by the labor it carries. Outside, the bell tolls again, and the monks file toward the chapel. You follow, the chanting drawing you in. The sound is low, resonant, rolling through stone like water. Latin words you cannot understand still soothe you, their rhythm hypnotic. The monks bow and rise in unison, their bodies as disciplined as their quills. In this moment, time feels suspended, as though centuries have folded into one chant. Later, at the refectory, you sit with them at long tables. The meal is plain: bread, beans, ale, Silence rules, broken only by the reading of scripture from a lectern. You chew slowly, listening to the words echo across stone, noticing how even eating becomes another form of order. You smile faintly at the practicality. Silence keeps food in mouths after all, though holiness gives the rule nobler weight. When the meal ends, the monks return to work, their rhythm unbroken. You step back into the sunlight, blinking, feeling the air of the world outside once more. The village waits below, noisy, muddy, alive. Yet part of you lingers in the monastery, where silence carries meaning and words are guarded like treasure. As you walk back down the path, you reflect on what you've seen. The monastery is both sanctuary and fortress, preserving fragments of a larger world, but sealing them behind stone. Without it, knowledge might wither. With it, knowledge becomes filtered, controlled, and you, a wanderer in this age, carry a glimpse of both sides, humbled by the patience of those who copy lines by candlelight, but wary of how easily power hides in silence. The village greets you again with clamor, children shouting, pigs squealing, women calling across lanes. The contrast feels jarring after the hush of cloisters. Yet you realize both worlds sustain each other, one through noise, one through silence. And between them, the medieval life beats on. The seasons turn again, and with them comes the festival. Word spreads days in advance. The feast of a saint, the turning of the calendar, a holy day threaded with earthy mischief. The village prepares not with solemn silence, but with anticipation, laughter, and the sly gathering of masks. You wake to the clatter of drums and the smell of roasting meat, stepping into a lane already alive with color and noise. At the square, poles are raised and banners hung. Strips of cloth in bright reds, yellows, and greens fluttering against the sky. Children weave flowers into garlands, slipping them over the heads of dogs and goats, who look unimpressed, but endure the attention. Men carry barrels of ale, their faces already flushed, while women set out loaves, pies, and wheels of cheese. The air smells of spice and smoke, wood crackling under the weight of cauldrons. This is no ordinary day. Masks appear everywhere, carved from wood, painted with soot, decorated with feathers. Some are crude, others startlingly elaborate. A man grins behind a fox face, a child peeks from behind a bird beak, and one bold woman dons horns, drawing laughter from her neighbors. These disguises free people from themselves, loosening tongues, bending the rules of hierarchy. For a day, the poor can mock the rich, the young can parody the old, and all can pretend the world is not bound by duty. Your mainstream historical fact: festivals in medieval Europe often blended sacred and secular, church calendar and pagan tradition. Saints' days coincided with older rituals, creating celebrations that were both devout and irreverent. The church tolerated the excess, sometimes grudgingly, recognizing that joy was as necessary as prayer. Watching the villagers dance, you see faith and mischief tangled together seamlessly. The music grows louder. Drums pound, fiddles screech, pipes trill. Feet stamp against the earth in time, and soon the square becomes a whirl of movement. You are pulled into the circle, hands clasping yours, bodies spinning in a chain that grows faster with each beat. Laughter bursts from you, unbidden, as you stumble, recover, and stumble again. The rhythm is irresistible, a tide of sound and motion carrying you with it. Amid the joy, games unfold. Boys chase one another with inflated bladders, smacking with harmless thuds. Girls toss apples into basins, daring one another to grab them with teeth. A sack race begins, the participants tripping and collapsing into laughter, their dignity forgotten. Even the elders watch, smiling, their usual sternness softened by the mood. The festival bends everyone, just slightly, toward joy. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval carnivals crowned a lord of misrule, a mock ruler chosen to preside over chaos. He might order silly punishments, demand songs, or declare nonsensical decrees. The villagers obey with glee, knowing the inversion is temporary, but relishing the absurdity. You glance around, half expecting such a figure to emerge, and sure enough, a man draped in rags and wearing a crooked crown staggers onto a barrel, proclaiming himself master of the day. The crowd roars, bowing extravagantly as he declares that pigs must henceforth be treated as noble guests. One is immediately led into the square and offered bread, to the delight of all. The priest watches from the church steps, his lips pressed thin, but his eyes betraying reluctant amusement. He knows that the festival, though unruly, will fill pews again tomorrow. Historians still argue whether such events undermined or reinforced authority. Did they provide dangerous glimpses of freedom or safe outlets for discontent? Tonight, the question is irrelevant. The villagers feast, drink, and laugh as though tomorrow does not exist. The food itself feels celebratory. Platters of roasted meat, pies stuffed with vegetables, honey cakes drizzled with syrup. You taste each, savoring the richness rare in daily meals. The ale flows freely, mugs clinking in countless toasts. To the harvest, to the saints, to the Lord of Misrule, to pigs. The last toast sparks another round of laughter, ale sloshing onto boots. The fire crackles high, sparks shooting upward like stars joining the celebration. As the night deepens, the masks grow stranger. Shadows flicker, and for a moment the square feels otherworldly, a carnival of spirits as much as people. A man in a bird mask leaps suddenly, flapping arms, drawing shrieks and giggles. A child in a demon face chases another, their cries echoing through the lanes. Behind each mask lies freedom. Freedom to mock, to play, to shed the weight of identity. You feel your own face ache from smiling. The music quickens again. Bodies spin faster. Voices rise louder. The world blurs into rhythm, color, and laughter. For a moment, the hardships of winter, the demands of the fields, the authority of steward and priest all fade into irrelevance. Here, under torchlight, with ale on tongues and mischief in eyes, the villagers reclaim their humanity fully. Eventually, exhaustion settles in. Dancers collapse onto benches, breathless, faces flushed. Children sleep in laps, masks slipping sideways. The Lord of Misrule tumbles from his barrel, snoring loudly as the crowd jeers affectionately. The fires burn lower, food dwindles, mugs empty. The village exhales, laughter softening into murmurs, movement slowing into stillness. You step away, watching the square from a distance. The banners flutter faintly in the night breeze, masks discarded, music fading. The joy lingers in the air, mingled with smoke and the scent of roasted meat. Tomorrow, order will return, masks tucked away, duties resumed. But tonight has carved its own space, a reminder that life, even in hardship, demands celebration. You walk back along the lane, the echo of drums still in your chest. Behind you, the square flickers faintly, torches burning low, voices fading into sleep. Ahead lies darkness, silence, and the steady rhythm of survival waiting to resume. but you carry the warmth of masks and laughter, a fleeting freedom folded carefully into memory. The festival fades into memory, and the village returns to its steady rhythm. Yet soon another rhythm emerges, quieter, but more insistent. The rhythm of coughs echoing in doorways, of fevers whispered about over wells, of remedies gathered and brewed in haste. You wake one morning to the sound of rasping breaths from a neighbor's hut, and you realize sickness has arrived. In a medieval world, illness is not an unexpected visitor, but a familiar one, always lurking, always ready to remind everyone of their fragility. The signs are everywhere. A child clings to her mother's skirts, face pale, lips dry. A man leans on his hoe, coughing into the earth, his shoulders trembling. The air smells of smoke, herbs, and the sourness of sweat. The church bell tolls more often now, not for festivals, but for prayers. Its sound heavy with the weight of fear. You feel it in your own chest, a nervous awareness that here, without modern medicine, every cough could be the beginning of disaster. Women gather herbs from gardens and hedgerows. Sage, thyme, and rosemary are boiled into teas, their steam rising into small rooms. Honey is drizzled into mugs, garlic crushed into pastes, vinegar poured onto cloths for compresses. Some remedies carry real power. Others are little more than hope wrapped in ritual. A mainstream historical fact grounds the scene. Medieval medicine leaned heavily on humoral theory, the belief that health depended on balancing four bodily humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Treatment sought to restore equilibrium, whether through herbs, bleeding, or purging. Watching villagers sip bitter brews or submit to small cuts that drain precious blood, you marvel at the persistence of belief, even when results are uncertain. Beside this, charms and amulets flourish. A child wears a string of beads said to ward off fever. A woman hangs a sprig of rowan above her door to keep sickness from entering. An older man mutters words over a bowl of water, dipping his hands, and then sprinkling droplets on his brow. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some people even believed carrying a dried toad in a pouch could cure plague boils. It's difficult not to smile at the absurdity, though you stop yourself. What seems laughable to you is desperate hope to them. The priest walks the lanes, offering blessings. He presses the sign of the cross onto foreheads, whispers prayers, burns incense in cramped huts. His presence brings comfort, though you notice his eyes flick nervously when he coughs into his sleeve. Faith here is both shield and surrender. God's will may cure or claim, and villagers cling to both possibilities. Historians still argue whether people viewed sickness as punishment for sin, random misfortune, or simply part of life's cycle. In truth, it seems all three beliefs overlap. One mother prays fervently at the church, promising offerings if her child recovers. Another shrugs grimly, muttering that the cold always takes the weakest. And others still reach for herbs, determined to fight with whatever tools they can. The alehouse remains open, though quieter. Instead of boisterous stories, conversations lean toward remedies and rumors. Someone swears that onion poultices saved his cousin. Another claims that a village 2 valleys over is entirely stricken, a warning carried by wandering shepherds. Fear spreads as quickly as illness, its symptoms visible in tightened jaws and hushed tones. Yet even here, laughter flickers. One man jokes that his wife's constant nagging has kept sickness at bay. No disease dares compete. The room erupts with weary chuckles, grateful for levity. You help carry water to a sick family, the bucket heavy, the air in their hut stifling. The mother thanks you with a weak smile, her child curled on straw beside her. She feeds him broth, spoon by spoon, each sip a prayer. The smell of herbs clings to the air, sharp and bitter. You sit for a while, feeling helpless yet strangely bound to their struggle. Illness here is not an individual burden. It is communal, woven into the village's shared existence. At night, the sound of coughing drifts across the square like a grim chorus. Firelight flickers through shutters, shadows pacing within. You lie awake on straw, staring at the beams overhead, aware that each day is fragile. Your body, so strong in your own time, feels vulnerable here. A simple fever could unmake you. That thought presses heavily, yet it also deepens your respect for those who endure this world daily, without complaint, without escape. One evening, you walk past the church and see candles glowing in rows, their light shimmering against stone walls. Families kneel, whispering prayers, their faces pale, their eyes lifted in hope. The air smells of wax and smoke, heavy with devotion. A bell tolls softly, marking another soul lost. Grief folds into ritual, and ritual folds into resilience. The villagers rise, wipe their tears, and walk back to their tasks. Life does not pause. The healer, a woman with lined face and steady hands, moves from hut to hut. She gathers herbs, mutters charms, brews potions. Some call her wise. Others whisper uneasily about sorcery. Yet they all accept her help. You watch her press a poultice onto a boy's chest, her expression calm, her voice low. The boy's breathing eases slightly, and gratitude flickers in his mother's eyes. You wonder how much of the healing lies in herbs, and how much in the healer's presence itself. As spring edges closer, the sickness begins to recede. Not all survive, but many recover, their strength returning slowly. Laughter creeps back into the lanes, though quieter, more cautious. The priest offers thanks at the altar. The healer gathers new herbs. The villagers resume their rhythm. Illness has passed, for now, but its shadow lingers, reminding everyone that life hangs always by a thread. You breathe deeply in the cool morning, the air fresher, the coughs fewer. Survival feels like triumph, even though you know the cycle will return. Still, for this moment, the village exhales together, grateful simply to endure. The storm does not arrive with warning. It creeps first as a low growl in the distance, rolling across the fields like some heavy creature too large to see. You stand outside with others, squinting at the sky, and notice how quickly light drains from it. Clouds gather thick and bruised, swallowing the sun until the world dims to a strange twilight. The air smells charged, sharp, as though the ground itself holds its breath. Chickens scuttle into coops, dogs whine, and the villagers begin shuttering windows with quick, practiced movements. A sudden crack of thunder splits the silence, rattling rafters and hearts alike. Rain follows, first in soft specks, then in sheets that pelt roofs, soak cloaks, and turn the lane instantly to muck. You hurry with others toward the nearest hall, feet sliding, clothes clinging cold and heavy. The church doors swing wide, villagers pouring inside. Voices hushed now under the roar of the storm. The stone walls embrace you with damp chill, but compared to the torrent outside, they feel safe. Candles are lit hastily, flames flickering in the draft. Shadows stretch tall along the nave, bending across carved saints and painted walls. The priest leads a prayer, voice steady though eyes flick toward the roof with each crack of thunder. Families cluster close, children press to parents' sides, eyes wide with both fear and awe. You sink to the cold floor, straw scattered beneath, the sound of rain hammering above like endless drumming. Your mainstream historical fact. In the medieval imagination, storms were often seen as divine judgment. Lightning striking a field or roof could be interpreted as punishment, a call for penance. Villagers sometimes rang church bells during storms, believing the sound could scatter thunderclouds. As you sit inside the echoing church, you hear the bell's dull toll, half ritual, half desperate hope. A sharp gust forces the door ajar, rain lashing in until two men shove it closed again. Their faces glisten with water, their breaths loud, but they grin grimly, shaking their heads as if to mock the storm's fury. Humor, however faint, still slips through, easing the tightness in the room. One mutters that the saints are arguing too loudly again, drawing a few chuckles. It's a small defiance against fear. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some believed lightning could be trapped in charms, bits of glass, or carved stones carried as talismans. Such objects, sometimes called thunderstones, were actually prehistoric tools unearthed in fields, reinterpreted as fallen shards from storms. Imagine clutching a flint-axe head in your pocket, convinced it holds the storm's power at bay. You wonder if anyone here has one hidden under their cloak right now. The storm intensifies. Rain pounds louder. Wind howls through every crack, and thunder crashes close enough to make the floor tremble. Children whimper, women cross themselves, men shift uneasily. The priest raises his voice higher, prayers rolling faster, steadier, fighting to cover the storm's roar. The smell of wet wool fills the air, mingling with wax and incense, heavy and human. Historians still argue whether villagers truly feared storms as omens or accepted them as natural cycles. Evidence suggests both. Some turned to ritual, others shrugged pragmatically, patching roofs and fences as soon as skies cleared. Tonight, in this church, you see both responses woven together. Fear thick in eyes, but readiness simmering beneath. Tools already waiting for the dawn. The hours stretch. The storm rages. Then, at last, the thunder begins to roll farther away. The rain softens. The wind sighs instead of screams. The bell falls silent. The priest lowers his hands, and the villagers exhale as one. Relief spreads, laughter cautious at first, then freer, louder. Someone jokes that the pigs will be swimming tomorrow. Another mutters that the Lord of Misrule must have sneezed too hard. The church, moments ago heavy with fear, lightens into camaraderie. When the doors finally creak open, the air outside feels washed clean, sharp with the smell of wet earth. The lane is a river of mud. Roofs drip steadily, and fields glisten like mirrors. Villagers step out slowly, stretching, blinking at the full moonlight breaking through ragged clouds. Work begins instantly, checking fences, calming animals, sweeping water from thresholds. Survival, as always, waits for no one. You help gather branches fallen from trees, dragging them into piles. Your hands ache, your legs slip in the mud, yet you feel strangely exhilarated. The storm was a trial, but also a reminder. Here, survival is never solitary. Fear was endured together, laughter shared in the same shadows, recovery begun side by side. As the night quiets, you return to your straw bed, the rafters still dripping faintly. Sleep comes slowly, your ears still tuned to phantom thunder, your body heavy from effort. Yet in your chest lies a small steadiness, the knowledge that storms pass, and what binds the village is not the weather, but the shelter found together. Night falls once more, the village settling under its cloak of quiet. You return to the small room where you first awoke, straw beneath you, shadows stretched long across the rafters. The air smells faintly of smoke, of wool, of the damp that never quite leaves the walls. Your body sinks into the bedding, tired from days of toil, celebration, and fear. The faint crackle of a dying fire comforts you, reminding you that even in darkness, warmth lingers. Outside, the lane is silent, save for a dog barking once before settling again. You think of the rhythm of this life, how mornings began with roosters and bells, how days filled with labor in fields or chatter by the well, how evenings drew villagers to alehouses or hearths. You recall the market's bustle, the steward's court, the festival masks, and the sudden arrival of a storm that drove everyone into shelter. Each moment felt fleeting, yet together they shaped the essence of medieval existence. Survival. Shared. There is no grandeur here, no palaces or kings, yet the smallness holds its own power. A loaf of bread, coarse and dense, is treasure. A fire's warmth is salvation. A single story told by candlelight can ease the weight of hunger or fear. You realize this is how people endured, not only through toil, but through moments of joy tucked between hardships. The laughter after a clumsy dance, the whispered prayer beside a sickbed, the pride of carrying water without spilling a drop. These fragments, humble and human, are what stitch the days together. A mainstream historical fact lingers in your mind. For most of Europe, more than 90% of people lived like this, bound to villages, fields, and seasons. The splendor of knights and courts filled chronicles, but ordinary lives like these were the true backbone of the age. They bore the weight of lords and kings on their labor, their taxes, their obedience. Without them, castles would crumble, armies starve, churches empty. Their anonymity does not erase their importance, it magnifies it. And yet, within this anonymity, quirks flourished. You remember the herbalist's charms, the onion garlands strung against illness, the fox mask dancer spinning wildly during the festival. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed cats carried protective spirits, keeping not only rats, but also malevolent forces at bay. Imagine a scruffy cat, curled in straw, unknowingly promoted to guardian of souls. These beliefs, half superstition, half survival, reveal the color within hardship. Historians still argue whether peasants of this age were crushed by misery or content within their cycles. Were they endlessly oppressed, or did they find satisfaction in stability, routine, and community? The debate has no single answer, because both truths breathe here. You have seen weariness etched in bent backs, but also joy rising in songs and dances. Perhaps life was never only suffering, never only peace, but always both. Balanced on a blade as sharp as a scythe. You stretch on the straw, your mind drifting through the memories of these days. You see again the monks bent over parchment, the merchant with jars of spice, the steward balancing disputes with stern words, the villagers huddled in prayer while thunder shook the rafters. Each moment etched into you, each one ordinary yet immense. You feel both outsider and participant, woven into their rhythm, though you never belong to their world. The fire dwindles, the shadows lengthen. You hear the faint rustle of mice in the thatch, the distant murmur of a neighbor's cough, the steady sigh of the wind pressing against shutters. The village sleeps, yet life continues, fragile but unbroken. You close your eyes, straw prickling your skin, and drift between waking and dream. The medieval world folds around you, not as a story of lords and battles, but as a quiet song of ordinary endurance. The journey quiets now, soft and unhurried, your thoughts easing like ripples fading across still water. You have walked muddy lanes, carried heavy buckets, bent your shoulders to tools, and shared in laughter that rose like sparks from a fire. Each image softens as it passes, the chatter at the well, the rhythm of scythes through grain, the warmth of ale, lifting voices in song. These memories settle gently, not pressing, simply resting in place as the night folds around you. Let the noise of fields and markets fade into distance, their urgency dissolving into calm. You are safe, here and now. No demands waiting, no duties calling. The air slows, the shadows soften, the weight in your chest lightens. Imagine the straw beneath you smoothing, the rafters above steady and still, the faint glow of embers lingering just long enough to comfort. Breathe easily, deeply, without hurry. The rhythm is yours alone now, unbroken, quiet. The world can wait until morning. For this moment, nothing is required except rest. Let the last sounds blur into silence. Let the stories slip into dream. Let your body sink and your mind drift. Sleep is already here, gentle, patient, carrying you onward.